Hi, I'm Jay, and this is Spinning Yarns. I'm not actually spinning any yarn. God, I wish I was, but I can't do that. I'm moving in a few months. I can't pick up another hobby right now. But I figured it's a working title. We'll see if we keep it. Play on the telling stories. You know what I mean. I don't need to explain this to you, hypothetical person on the internet. But I figured trying a weekly thing whenever I can. I'm not gonna stress myself out about it because it's not that deep. But I figured it would keep me going. Keep me working on projects and actually making progress on them, because I do want to work through my stuff. I have several whips at the moment. The goal is to put these out on Wednesdays, but we'll see. I'm going to do my best, but no promises. Today's tea is hot chocolate because I need creamer in tea. Otherwise, it makes my throat feel bad. And I decided to try a new creamer last week when I got my groceries, and it made me nauseous. So, no creamer yet. So, hot chocolate behind the bastards mug. It's my favorite. And it has a little bit of salted caramel simple syrup in it because I wanted to be fancy. I'm working on several things. First thing, I actually haven't worked on this in about a week because I've shifted my focus to other projects, though I can't do that for too long because I am worried about not getting done on time. But I'm working on a test knit for Heels and Needles Knits on Instagram of her Bastille sweatshirt. Got a little bit tangled. Give me a moment. Here we are. We'll worry about that later. All of this yarn is from my stash. The navy blue and excuse me. Are we done? Okay. The navy blue and brown came from Thistle Creative Reuse, a secondhand craft store in my area that I think I will mention in most of my videos. And I got both of these colors a while ago. And the black, which I've just started adding because I forgot to grab one of the colors, but that's fine. I've just started adding in the black because originally I was going to keep it for the cuffs, but I'm worried about having enough yarn, so I'm making it stretch, and there's an orange yarn I have, a burnt orange, that I'm going to use for the collar and cuffs and stuff. I believe they're folded collars and cuffs, so that'll be fun. And I think it'll be a fun splash of color. But I don't think adding it in as a stripe would be a good idea. I think that would be too much. So we're just keeping it to the 3 for now. I've got, I think a fourth of the recommended torso length done or something like that. I'm trying to figure out whether I should continue. I should absolutely do the torso first, because if I need to, I can make part of the sleeves themselves the orange, because I have 2 skeins of the orange and basically the same color. One of them didn't have the tag, so I don't quite remember if they're the same, actually the same yarn. But if it looks like they're slightly off, I'll just alternate. I swear to God, I have for sure one more full skein of the brown, and I'm not done with the brown yet, to be fair. I'm worried first that I'll run out of the navy blue, which, thinking about it, probably isn't the end of the world, because then it'll just look like there was a gradient from the navy blue to the black. So actually it'll work out. Everyone else is looking great. The designer is making another sample, which is wild. Also, she works so fast. Insane. This is gonna be my first finished knit sweater. And my first finished sweater for me. I finished a few before. I finished a baby sweater for my cousin, and then a sweater for one of my sisters, and a sweater for one of my brothers. All crochet. I am proud of all of them. The one for my sister was a granny square one based off of, I think it was Daisy Farm Crafts granny square vest pattern. It was a free one, and I just essentially put sleeves on it. I forget who it was by, but the one for my cousin was a moss, like an even moss stitch sweater, and the one for my brother was, I used a guide to figure out the raglan increases, and I referenced measurement charts for standard sizes, but I freehanded it. And I used a combination of, I think I alternated black stitches and black rows and colored rows. So it was kind of a rainbow thing, and some of them were variegated, and some of them were solid color, but I switched between, I believe it was just double and half double. If I'm making a crocheted sweater, I'm not doing a special stitch like a granny stitch or a moss stitch, I like to alternate because I think it makes a nice, like, subtle texture that can still be pretty even, and it keeps me interested. Because I hate crocheting the same thing over and over and over again with no change. There needs to be at least something. That's part of why I like variegated yarn so much. But I think that's also part of why I prefer this type of stripes. I originally had a pattern in mind, but that kind of went out the window because I added a new color and because when I went to combine the panels. So we're just I'm improvising. It's actually pretty fun because I can just kind of go by what I think will balance best. And honestly, I haven't been able to draw much, so it's nice to stretch my composition muscles again. I have chronic fatigue. We don't know why yet. We're figuring it out. We know it's not my thyroid and it's not diabetes. That's about it. Probably not POTS, because I don't have enough symptoms. So I don't have energy to draw very much, unfortunately. And I'm switching more to fiber arts stuff anyway at the moment. But it's a bit rougher than I'd want. I actually got this yarn in a mystery box, so like the brown. I wouldn't have grabbed it otherwise. Like I wouldn't have bought it if I'd seen it in the store, because I prefer softer yarn. The navy blue is softer. And the black, I think, I don't think it's called Thick and Thin. It's something. It's a wool blend. You can get it at Walmart. I'd gotten it like a while ago for a fingerless gloves project that I never finished. And I have 2 skeins of this. This is a partial one. I'm pretty sure this is the partial one anyway. And then I'll have whatever was in the fingerless glove too. So that'll be nice. That'll be good. I am torn between focusing on this the rest of the week and I guess both of my other whips right now, but especially this, because this is a present for a friend that I started last year. I was like, yeah, I can finish a pair of socks for someone who's 6 foot by his birthday. No, of course not. I've successfully finished one pair of socks, and the second sock was several months after the other. It didn't help that I was like, yeah, I can like do I can do color work without consulting anything. And like I like how it looks. I think it's fun. It's outside of my skill level, even like a year later. Mostly because I haven't done socks a whole lot since, just generally. And I haven't done any color work sock patterns, so I'm not familiar with what that actually looks like yet. And also, I hadn't picked it up in several months, so I forgot where I was, and the needles fell out, and it was a whole thing. And I wasn't sure if it would fit properly because it's color work, so it's tighter. So I'm frogging it, and I'm making a new pair. And what I'm going to do to try and avoid second sock syndrome is I have a longer set of these needles too. So actually, I have them right here. I'm using the 2.75 millimeters. So I'm going to switch, now that I've done the heel turn, which, by the way, my favorite part of socks. It's so cool seeing it like build. Very fun. Very, very, very cool. 10 out of 10. I'm going to switch out these shorter needles for the longer ones so that I have enough room to work the gusset. And then I'm going to cast on the next pair on the small needles. And that way I can, like, if I don't want to deal with the gusset, I can work on the leg and heel of the second sock. And fortunately, I know how much I need because I was smart and I made note of how many rows I made the cuff. And because I'm doing this, okay, there we go. Now it shows up a bit better. It's a bit hard to see. And that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be a bit more subtle. I'm doing a subtle stripe pattern. The gray stripes are 7 rows wide, and the green stripes are 5 rows wide. And I know that let me make sure I'm remembering correctly. Yes. My last row of this leg was 4 out of the 5 green rows for the stripe I was on. So I don't have to worry as much about measuring. So hopefully it'll go a bit faster. I did not make note of how many rows the back of the heel was. So that'll be fun. And this is felted tweed, so it's a little bit difficult to tell what the rows are, though, because this is a light enough color that it's easier than the dark gray. I'm also holding the yarn double, which I didn't do last time. I'm a bit worried about the finishing texture because I'd forgotten until I'd already decided what to do, but I used a different yarn for the like brownish tan. So, and that one I believe was superwash. At the very least, it's softer, and that really helped soften the sock up generally. But this, again, is felted tweed. We'll see how it works out. Hopefully he will enjoy, he will appreciate the effort, even if they're too rough. But like, I'm going to wash them. I'm going to make sure the water's warm, which means we have to wait until after our water heater gets fixed because it broke today. My housemates caught it in time, so it didn't do a whole lot of damage as far as we can tell. But apparently it's under warranty still, which helps. But according to the landlord, they won't be able to get a replacement in for like 2 to 4 days. So it'll be fun. At least it is like, it's fine. We can still use our water. Again, minimal damage. We're good. Hopefully just minimal damage, but regardless, that's not on us. Still better than the mold problem we had earlier, and we think there's just mold in the walls generally. But that's a whole other issue. Still far better than other houses we've lived in. At least one other house we've lived in. Mostly because there's actually decent response times and they've actually tried to upkeep the house. It's just older. It's from like the 70s. Anyway, I'm going to switch these out soon. This is the second whip. I want to get this done by my friend's birthday. You know, once off per year. But again, this needs to be done by April 11th. This needs to be done by, I think, that same week. And then at also around the same time, I'd like to be finished with my Ren Fair outfit. I've had a few false starts. I wasn't originally going to use this yarn for my Ren Fair outfit, but I decided I liked the color scheme better than the other yarn I was going to use, which I've also had for forever. This is actually new yarn because I have no impulse control. I have some. I have enough impulse control to not be like financially ruined. I'd been eyeing this yarn. The variegated yarn is a colorway from Yarnsmith's Lagoon line. And this is, I just think I have, I can see another one off screen. This is their Create line. Again, also Yarnsmiths in Champagne. My plan, originally, this was just going to be a patchwork vest. I decided I didn't want to do that, but I really liked how the colors looked in crochet, not liking it as much in knitting. When I decided I wanted to switch to using this yarn for my Ren Fair costume, I was like, ooh, you know what would look cool? Garter stitch. But I don't think it would be as structured as I would like it to be, and it's a delicate balance between structure and not dying because it's going to be April in Texas and I have no idea how hot it's going to be. Once it would be all blocked, I'm not sure it would actually work well. And again, I'm not a fan of how the colors were working out. So I'm trying again, and I'm trying with something that I think I'm going to like better. I watched a couple of Tony from TL Yarn Crafts videos today and got the idea to do linen squares in the join as you go method to make things easier. And also, I've realized, inspired by seeing Annabeth is Knitworthy's recent whip check-in, they're working on an heirloom quilt cardigan. So this is not going to be like the quilt star motif. It's going to be diamonds, but wrong side. Big diamonds. Do we see the vision? Do we get the vibes? I hope so. I think it's going to look cool. I haven't decided what side is going to be the right side. I know functionally which side is the right side for working on it, but I think that the wrong side of the joins could look really interesting. And I'm not going to lie, besides the tail here, I kind of like how this looks. So we're just going to see as we go. Fortunately, I'll be able to configure it, and hopefully I'll be able to make something that can work as an everyday outfit. I think doing ones with the tie sides could be interesting. I think that construction is interesting. It's just a lot of the ones I've seen haven't quite been my style. Or I might do the tie and then rework it to be a normal vest after Ren Fair. Who knows? Not me. We're playing it by ear. But this is this gives the yarn enough structure that I'm not as worried about it. Because this is, I don't know if this would technically be like a 2-ply. It's disaster yarn is what it is. And I knew that when I bought it, but the colors are so nice. You don't really get this shimmery kind of look with a lot of other plies. or at the very least, if it's possible, it's not as common from what I've seen. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I would love a yarn that's easier to work with than this. Still not as bad as the hobby yarn I have. That's like proper one ply. Pain in the ass. Beautiful pain in the ass. But both of these are full acrylic. So I managed one square, but I'm hoping that doing the join as you go thing will help me be motivated. And this is like, I'm surprised by how light this feels, to be honest. It looks like it should be heavier because it's linen stitch. I love linen stitch, by the way. Amazing texture. Beautiful, 10 out of 10. And I'm glad I saw the video that reminded me about it. It was Tony's 2022 temperature blanket, I think. I didn't want to do granny squares because I didn't want that look. And I figured that I could get a fine vibe if it was maybe granny stitch but not a granny square. But I think I'm gonna like this better, and again, I think it's gonna be light enough that I'll be okay. The more I can keep myself aired out at Ren Fair, the better, because I hold heat like a motherfucker. Make sure I have something I'll like, but that will also will not smother me to death. Oh, little thing, and probably everyone knows this, but I thought it was so cool seeing the separation as I'm frogging the old heel for this sock. I think I don't have much to say about it. I just think it's neat. I'm using Nimble Needles sock recipe for it. I did fuck up by separating the leg yarn by breaking it off before starting the heel. That's okay. I'll just re-add it and it'll be fine. When you're not using your knitting needles, do you put them away or do you stab your project with them? I stab my project with them because otherwise I'll lose them. Anyway, I've been thinking about gender in craft. I'm trans and I have a bit of a complicated relationship with it. I've been working on an unpopular opinions video, and something that I think I honestly just needed to write through. It didn't make it into the video because it's purely a me problem. Something about everyone speaking softly and being like all the soft aesthetics, and I don't know how to describe this without using soft a million times. Do you know what I mean? And I'm naturally pretty soft-spoken, so I get it, but it feels stifling sometimes, and I think that is gender shit for me. It's not actually a problem. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this well, but I think it's partially a gender thing and partially I guess it would be a gender thing anyway, but a religion thing. I grew up Mormon, and even though I didn't grow up the most fundamentalist, the fundy baby voice was still a thing. I actually remember my mom pointing it out when I was in high school and complaining about it, and I didn't know how to respond then. But yeah, no, I get it. Because if you listen to the church leaders' addresses, the men and the women have very different cadences, and that bleeds into the local congregations too. So I associate widespread soft-spokenness with that, I think, with the keep sweet sort of thing. But again, I think that's purely a me issue. And I guess I'm worried about is it a conformity thing, or is it just the sorts of people that Fiber Arts attracts? And I hope it's not the former, and it's probably just the latter. But I have a complicated relationship with Fiber Arts. I learned them in a homemaking context, starting when I was, 8, 9? Before double digits, certainly. We learned embroidery in Activity Day Girls, which at the time was the Mormon equivalent of the girl equivalent of Cub Scouts in the church, because that was I when I grew up, the church was still associated with the Boy Scouts. They stopped at some point, not because of the widespread abuse issues, but because of gay people. We were taught embroidery by having a sampler of the Beatitudes, which was a quote by Gordon B. Hinckley, who I believe at the time he was still the president of the church, the prophet. I don't think he died yet. And in Young Women's, age 12 to 18, we had what was called Personal Progress. And I think they've updated the youth programs a little bit since. So I don't know what it is now. They changed it like a year or two after I graduated high school. There were several virtues. Again, this was the equivalent of Boy Scouts. Girl Scouts, never heard of her. It was faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works, integrity, and virtue. And all of them but virtue had like 2 or 3 activities that you had to do of varying lengths, and then a couple that you could pick from or make your own, and then a 10-hour project. And a lot of them, especially in, I believe, good works, individual worth, and maybe divine nature, had to do with homemaking. Even if they didn't, I guess they did pretty explicitly say it.
Hi, hello, addendum. Editing J here. First of all, wanted I wanted to look into the like personal progress stuff a little bit more, just to be a bit more accurate and to make sure I was remembering it right. And it's knowledge, individual worth. Kind of. There's not as much in there, but definitely knowledge, good works, and divine nature. And they do explicitly talk about being a homemaker. If you look here, it gave me like psychic damage for real. This is the personal progress handbook I had. The most recent copyright is from 2009. So if you look here, this is entirely my point, is associating crafts with homemaking and peacekeeping. Peacekeeping was another huge thing that kind of stressed me out. So that's also what I was trying to say with the whole keep sweet thing, is it illogically, in this case, in the sense of like the fiber arts world, it like irrationally sets off alarm bells for me, because I'm used to that subconscious pressure of like being a peacemaker, and that's associated with the soft spokenness and the like soft hobbies, all of that. So first of all, define feminine qualities. You can kill me. Uh, um, being a peacekeeper, peacemaker, whatever, pacemaker. Um, not that one. Where is it? Yeah. See, peacemaker. And then this one, develop a skill that you could use in your future home. List out the divine attributes and roles of women. Use an artistic skill or handicraft you've learned for your current or future home. Stuff like that. If we look in knowledge, talents, and like learning things is not bad, right? In Boy Scouts, you learn skills and things. My point is not, oh, you shouldn't have a youth program where you teach things. It's that this very specific idea of being a woman, I have had a bit of a difficult time removing that from fiber arts, because, well, I didn't like learn how to knit as one of my projects. Girl who was my age did. I already knew how to crochet, so I used that. I bring up that project later. I made like principles of scriptures and stuff, and it's just I don't know if I'm making sense. But they do also have things like first aid and stuff, which is good. They do have things where you volunteer. One of the options is you can volunteer in your community. And there is one about learning marketable skills, which is better than it could have been. Uh, I latched on to that a lot. Anyway, not the point. Not the point. This is supposed to be just a quick add in. Good work, so we can see that too. Service as part of family living, as part of homemaking. And again, service is not an inherently bad thing. Wanting to make your home a safe space is not an inherently bad thing. But it's the bioessentialism of it all. Yeah. So focusing on service as specifically a trait of women, and like that's a thing for the men too. And that's something my dad is really focused on, but it's not really like it's different. The adult women's group is literally called the Relief Society. But yeah, prepare to be a homemaker by collecting recipes, shopping for food, and preparing meals. I also did one where I transcribed old recipe cards, which is just a helpful thing in general. But like emergency situations, legitimately great skill to learn. Unfortunately, didn't do that one. But point is, this was my reference point for gender roles and by extension, not even by extension, because they were intrinsically linked, gender roles and gender. We did crafts while the young men learned how to put up tents. If anyone happens to know about equivalent merit badges for the Boy Scouts for things like homemaking and peacemaking, let me know. I'm legitimately curious. It doesn't seem like there was. If there was, it wasn't emphasized. It seemed like they were a lot more focused on things like carpentry and more focused on first aid and on survival stuff. So let me know. Also, if anyone wants me to like go through all of this, let me know. I'm stopping myself from doing that now because, again, not the point. But I am down to do that if anyone's interested.
Because the point was to learn skills to be used in your future home. So I'd already learned crocheting, but I used it. I used crocheting to do a project. I think I can pull it up. This monstrosity of a blanket, that was one of my 10-hour projects. I was super into color pooling at the time, if you couldn't tell. And they had varying successes. This was actually cooler than I gave myself credit for, this one. There's a huge expectation that you would do personal progress, even though it wasn't required to like graduate the youth program. And you got little prizes for completing. You got like a ribbon. It's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into that now. Not the point. Point is gender. I was never very good at completing personal progress. I tried, but I didn't have the support I needed, and I didn't know how to ask for that support. So by the time we moved from New Jersey to Texas, I was almost in high school, and most of the girls my age were far ahead of me. So that was a whole thing. I didn't really get help from the leaders, and it's possible I turned it down because I didn't want to like bother them or something. I don't remember. The only thing I really remember in that regard was asking if we could do a personal progress thing as a mutual activity, mutual being the midweek youth activity. Most of the time it was separated by gender. And like once a month we would have a co-ed one. And it was not uncommon for there to be personal progress nights where you would focus on one of the experiences, they were called, one of the tasks you had to do, so you could mark it off and be closer to finished. I never completed it, which I felt shitty about. I even got an extension on it, and the moment that extension passed, I was already in college, and I was like, I suddenly do not give a shit about this anymore, could not care less. It was in the middle of making some sort of like calendar thing. I don't think I still have it, but turns out undiagnosed ADHD, autism, and a couple mental illnesses makes it difficult to do a thing like that, especially when your family is also undiagnosed with several of those things. So it ended up not happening. But point is, while I did largely do crafting for me growing up, and I just kind of was drawn to it generally. It was a way to express myself. It was something to do with my hands. I still associated it with gender roles and with homemaking to some extent. So it's been kind of rough sometimes. I'm better about it, but I think that's part of why I feel so strongly about certain things like, oh, there's not really a whole lot of great mask fashion in comparison to femme fashion in the fiber arts world, even though we could absolutely be doing better with that. And I would love to get to the point where I can provide more variance at some point. And the vibe I get from most content creators, I hope isn't a conformity thing and is just birds of a feather sort of thing. But it's interesting for sure. I did my first self-guided project in my embroidery class in college was about that, or at least it turned into that. I was mostly focusing on the process because I like learning techniques. But did I do that right? I don't think so. No, I did. We're good. Okay. I was thinking while I was working on it, I was thinking about gender and fiber arts. Because, historically it's been women's work. And there's a whole can of sexism worms tied into that, and lots of other worms. So many worms. I wonder also if part of the reason I've been getting so much into fiber arts recently is because I've been getting more comfortable with my gender identity. I have been, I don't know, hypothetical person listening to this. I don't know if you play Baldur's Gate 3. You might be tired of hearing about Baldur's Gate 3. You may have never heard of Baldur's Gate 3. But I fucking love it. And I've gotten back into it recently. Patch 7, as cool as it was, kind of killed my joy a little bit because I had all of my save files got corrupted, all of the ones that had mods in them, which I knew was a risk, but it hadn't come to fruition for any of the other patches. I was in the last act. Spoilers, I guess, for the game generally. I had several saves. A couple of them were in Act 1. So that wasn't a huge deal. One of them was in Act 2. I had just finished the Shadow Quest stuff. So the Shadow Curse quest stuff. So I could have Halsin in my party because that save, I was trying to romance both Shadowheart and Halsin. I'm going to eventually restart that one. I've also revamped the character, updated his motifs and his colors, color palette, all of that, his backstory. I just do not have the capacity. I don't feel like playing multiple saves at once right now. And I had at least one in Act 1 who is actually the younger sibling of my Dark Urge character. I had managed to finish my Dark Urge save before then. I think I would have cried, like actually cried, if I hadn't before patch 7. So I managed to finish that one and my very first save, which was my wizard guy. But I had one in Act 3 where I'd already killed Orin and I was about to do the Iron Throne quest. Like, I was at the docks, I just saved Volo. So I've decided that unless I want to revamp her character, that save just ends the way I want it to end. I've already kind of mapped out my character arcs anyway. I really enjoy thinking about, like, after the game, what they would do, especially because I consider Honor Among Thieves to be canon, because I like it. I think it's fun. Yeah, that's definitely, there's more. Ugh, okay. Whatever. But, like, do you see the vision? I hope you see the vision. So, my Drow Paladin is just kind of in limbo, I guess. She'd already had her Oathbreaker moment. We finished up Astarian's arc, which is who she was romancing. Right now, my current save is Petrus, who is a Drow noble renegade. He's 24. So many things have happened to him. Part of his arc is him learning what he likes and what he is beyond what he's either been told or what he's had to take on in order to survive. I really like hair as a storytelling thing, but I didn't want to just do the thing where, oh, the drow cuts their hair, whatever. I already kind of have that with Dora, but, and it's not just that, there's other stuff involved in it. But I didn't want to just do a third act hair change, because I've done that with all of my other characters that have made it to the third act so far. Petrus, his like, he hasn't had access to dye in a while, so his roots are all grown out and stuff. And he starts out as a rogue. He's wearing very dark grays and some blues, but mostly the stuff that lets you blend into shadows. And very slowly starts to experiment with clothing and with different colors. Right now he's wearing like a solid like rust orange. Amazing. He at the goblin camp poisons like half the camp because he's like, oh, I have an opportunity to do this. We will be fighting a lot, far fewer people because of this. He doesn't know how he feels about that. Because he's proud that he got away with it and also feels weird about it. He meets Minthara, and that's bad. So they finish that up. And he has a bit of a mentee little teensy tiny bit of a mental breakdown. He also puts on, he thinks he's killed Minthara. He has not, and hopefully I did it right, and Minthara actually shows up in Act 2. Because I want to actually see her in-game, and I haven't been able to do that yet. He thinks she's dead, and put on her armor because he's familiar with it. He knows what it does. He's like, okay, this will help us. We need to kill the other two people and get the fuck out of here. And then they get back after freeing Halsin and killing the other two leaders. And he fully freaks the fuck out. Like, he goes, the ruins, the ruins in the main Act 1 camp where the magic mirror is. He goes there, rips off his armor, shittily cuts his hair. And I forgot that Mole was, like, hangs out on the log that connects the main camp to that ruins area during the tiefling party. So it's, I love the idea that she's been there for a solid, 30 minutes listening to this guy freak the fuck out. He doesn't know she's there until he walks out to this child who has just said that she's stolen alcohol. Cinema. Pure cinema. But it's been nice running a Will romance again. It's so sweet. But this time around, I've really been noticing, I knew that he had fewer lines than the other companions, but I've really been seeing it. I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do with his hair. Right now it's scrungly and short, but it's his natural hair color again. I think he's going to dye it, or at least try to dye it at some point. And I don't know whether or not he's going to leave it long, grow it out long or not, but he was an arcane trickster rogue, and I'm multi-classing him into wizard. I've been getting a necromancer vibe from him. I thought about bard for a solid minute, but I don't think that's quite right. And also, my poly run is a bard, and I don't want to be burnt out on bard by the time I feel like playing Candor. So wizard it is, and I'm having fun with him. Anyway, I hope you have a good time whatever time it is, it's a time somewhere. Stay safe, stay well. I'll see you next time.